Hi, my name's Juliet. So, it's my pleasure to show you my brand new book. Okay, fine. So maybe God exists. So I've been writing poetry for years, 20 years or more, and some writings. But this book is a compilation of my life journey through faith, through miracles, and through many, many, many difficult times. Trauma with a capital T. But actually, what I want to read for you today is not actually about my own life story, although it was inspired by the commission that God gave me, which was to share his heart, his broken heart. And I took that commission very, very seriously. And that's when I started to write. And God gave me the gift and he gave me things to write about. So this is definitely about God's heart. It's called There Came a Day in Heaven. And in my imagination, I toyed and played with the notion that there was a day in heaven when God decided and knew that he was going to have to send Jesus to the earth to be sacrificed, to die on a cross, and that was going to be the only way to redeem the earth from sin. And so the musings of my mind reflected on all of that and came up with this very rich verse. It's called There Came a Day in Heaven. There came a day in heaven when grief consumed the air, when heavy lay the sorrow and thick was spread despair. God's heart was sorely troubled. His body ached with strain. He wiped his cheek in secret and sat to nurse the pain. He slumped his face down slowly and he caught it in his arm, then swept his brow most gently and breathed a silent calm. My Father, Jesus ventured, as close he drew beside, for no more could his silence conceal what was inside. My Father, he repeated, please tell what burden grows. I know the world is wicked. I know what evil flows. I know that this has grieved you. That much you can't disguise. I share this pain, my Father. Once more, it's man's demise. But, Father, there is something which you have dared not say. It far exceeds man's wickedness, and it ails you night and day. Father, hear me tender. We need to talk. We must. Please spill your heart with knowledge that you have my ear, my trust. Well, God just eyed him briefly and softly took his hand, whilst in his heart he cried out and hoped he'd understand. My son, he said, my precious, you're loved beyond all doubt. And that great depth of feeling is what my pain's about. Jesus searched his countenance for meaning he'd not heard. And though his lips were waiting, he could not say a word. He summoned all his trusting and brought it to his eyes, to nod a gentle prompting, with strength both warm and wise. My Jesus, God continued, I will try to explain. Just cast a glance down earthwards and see man's sin again. The world is worse than ever. Few men will stand for good, and though my laws are flouted, this time there'll be no flood. Of course, responded Jesus. This promise you have made. Your word endures forever, though time and space will fade. Again, there came a moment when something passed between the love of Son and Father was felt but went unseen. You cannot know my grieving. To speak to you of this were next the words God uttered, and held his gaze in his. His voice was thin with trembling, and his look was showing pale, but God was drawing purpose, his plan to now unveil. I see no other option, but someone else take blame for all that man be judged for every sin and shame, for every act of murder, for every heinous deed, for all the future kingdoms of power and lust and greed, for every lie and slander, for malice and deceit, for every man that's blasphemed or bowed at idols' feet, for every moral downturn, for every nation's guilt, for every cruel injustice. There's blood that must be spilt. God looked through blinks and tears to answer now his Son. But Jesus, also crying, now knew what must be done. God took a second's respite to map his words with care, for now he'd send for slaughter the Son he longed to spare. The punishment is vile, for justice claims its due. The sin of all the ages, I fear, must fall on you. God expected horror to fall from Jesus' face, a deluge of emotion and fumbled words of grace. But Jesus, touched so deeply by all his Father's woe, just smiled at him and whispered, my Father, I will go. With glassy eyes now weeping, and love and grief entwined, he spoke out one more promise with what courage he could find. I'll give each soul a future, to reign with you on high, but they must choose to love you, and for them I'll choose to die. Yes, there came a day in heaven when Jesus changed the script, and his heart of pure compassion left Satan's mandate stripped.